Welcome, everybody. This is the Business Success Show. I'm your host, Scott Patton, along with our other host, Chaffee Tai Win. How you doing, Chaffee?
Awesome. How are you, Scott?
Excellent. So this is one of those cases where when you don't have time to really focus on what you're doing and you don't pay attention because you're distracted, things go wrong. So Chaffee asked me a few days ago if we could do this episode half an hour earlier than we had planned. And because I've changed time zones and then unchanged time zones, and he is in a different time zone, when he said from this time to that time, I said no problem. And of course, I was stuck on the time he said in the wrong time zone. So we went live an hour ago without Chaffee, and then a few minutes ago, Chaffee said, "Okay, Scott, I'm ready to go." And it's kind of like, when you walk into a room and everybody's been fighting and you have no clue what's going on. Well, that was like Chaffee. He walked into this room and I'm like, oh no. So I called him up, told him everything that happened, said I need to not reschedule, but schedule a new I almost said Zoom. Sorry, StreamYard. We go on StreamYard event, and now we're live. So with that, Chaffee, how are things in your world?
Things are busy, obviously, although apparently not as busy as yours. So yes, I walked into the lion's den with Scott going, "Oh, where were you? I missed you an hour ago."
And then Scott looked at his calendar and realized that he had done everything an hour too soon. So
that's all right, though, because we're here now, and that's what matters.
That's right. And today's episode is all about fear. We're talking about some of the challenges for success that people have. And today we want to talk about fear. Before we get into that, I want to remind you that we are live, so you can ask questions wherever it is that you're seeing us, and we'll answer them live, although maybe not at the instant that you ask the question, particularly if it's not relevant to what we're talking about at that moment. And don't forget to please give us a thumbs up, 2 thumbs up if you can, subscribe, hit the bell, because then you'll always know when we're going live and you'll be able to join us. And Chaffee, you've got many, many years and decades of experience in the world of business, and you've been coaching some pretty amazing people to phenomenal success. So my advice to everybody is take advantage of our knowledge and ask those questions. So why is fear such a big part of the entrepreneur and the business person's lack of success, Chaffee?
Well, fear can be very helpful, right? It could prevent you from stepping into the landmine. It can prevent you from doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And at the same time, it could be very dangerous as well. And one of the acronyms that I like to use for fear, and if you're taking notes, this is a good time to take notes, is that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. So false evidence appearing real. And what that means is that a lot of times we're afraid of certain things, and that prevents us from moving forward and taking that next step, when in reality, if you actually look at the data, if you look at everything that's going on and everything that's happening, you're okay and you should be moving forward. You should be taking that next step, and you haven't. And so that's why it's dangerous, is because prevents you from achieving that next step. It prevents you from moving forward faster, falling forward faster, failing, for example. And we'll get into this, I know, Scott, is that, one of the biggest fears is the fear of failure. And we know that when you fail quickly and you fail forward, then you make a lot more progress, right? Failure is part of the success process. So
I was interviewing a real estate I would say maybe a part-time real estate investor, full-time real estate fund manager. And one of the quotes that came out of that particular interview was, if you're not losing money in real estate, you're not going to be very successful, because everyone will have that deal or a deal every once in a while where they lose money or they don't make as much money as they'd hoped to. And if you don't have that happening, then you're really not, he says, you're really not taking action the way that you should. And I thought that was a really a deep and certainly fearful statement, right? Because we want to have 100% successful real estate deals, 100% successful clients, 100%, and where does that ever happen? Well, maybe in the classroom once in a while when you fluke out and get 100% on your multiple choice questions. But in real life, it's hard to imagine sometimes even being 40% successful, right? How many women did you date before you met your wife, fell in love, and you've raising this amazing family, right? So and that's the other thing about, I guess, success is how do you define it? And were those all failures? No, you learned something and you grew and you became the person that your wife fell in love with. And so I think you're right. We need to keep moving forward as fast as we can.
Yeah, and you're right, Scott. In the real estate world, I mean, if you've never lost money in real estate, that's phenomenal. And I can tell you is that there's a strategy called armchair investing, which is you buy one property every year for 20 years. It's a phenomenal strategy, except it takes 20 years. Right. And so using that strategy, if you buy just one property every year and you spend the entire year doing research, you'll probably never lose money. It's a great strategy, right? And the challenge is, again, it takes 20 years, and 20 years in the overall scheme of things might not be a long time. In the scheme of business, if you want to move forward faster, then you'll probably have to do a little bit more. And as you said, Scott, it's okay to make mistakes along the way. And so instead of doing 20 properties in 20 years, what happens if you do 20 properties in a year and you lose money on one or two of those? Well, can the other 18 or 19 deals make up a lot more money than that one or two deals that you lost? And provided you're doing your research and provided you're doing it properly, then the answer should be yes, because you're making a lot more money than you actually lost because you're mitigating your risk, right?
Yeah.
So, and this topic of fear goes along with what we talked about last week, which was the topic of your comfort zone. And we talked about a turtle, where the turtle pulls in all its limbs and its head into the shell. And again, the same concept of when it's afraid, it pulls into its shell and it doesn't move. And that's the biggest challenge of fear, is that sometimes it prevents you from moving forward or backwards or anywhere. It just prevents you from moving and going anywhere. And if you want to succeed in business, you always have to continually move. And one of the quotes that I've been taught, one of the things that I always like to say is money likes to move, right? And money, when money sits still, as in under your bed or in a savings account, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't earn you money. It actually loses you money because of inflation, right? So money likes to move and change. And so unless you're making those, deals and you're moving forward with things, then you're stuck. And being stuck is not a good place to be.
And it's the same story. Doesn't matter what business that you're in, whether it's, things will work out really well with clients. Or if I was a grocery store manager for years, we would have people coming in and saying, the watermelon was rotten, I'd like a refund. And that, you could look at that as a failure. But, if we didn't put out any watermelon because we were afraid that 1 out of 1,000 would come back as a refund, we'd be out of business pretty fast, right? And in fact, it's kind of silly when you think about it, but that's the way we act so often.
Yeah. And in terms of business, again, Scott, a good example of this is this little company that you might have heard of called Facebook. When Facebook first started, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, is famous for saying basically break things quickly, right? And so that was a strategy of Facebook as they were growing to become one of the top 5 biggest companies in the entire world. Was that he would test out new features and functions of Facebook, and his team would roll it out. And if something broke, they fixed it quickly, and then rolled it back or put a fix and moved forward. Well, and that's how they grew Facebook, was by putting things out there and seeing if it would work or not, which, as an IT guy, I have some issues and challenges with. And that's how they grew so quickly, right? It was that they would roll something out, they would see what would work, what wouldn't work, they fix what failed, and then move forward fast. And the faster they did that, the faster they grew, and that's how Facebook became as big and as popular as it is today.
So Chaffee, what advice would you give to somebody who gets paralyzed with fear, like they're afraid things are going to go wrong?
So there's two things, right? Fear is as I said, false evidence appearing real, and you overcome fear by doing two things. The first thing is education. Is you get educated, you learn more, you get more information, you get more help and support, right? You get coaching, you can find somebody that has done it and can talk you through it. And so that's the first thing, is the more you know about something, the less fearful you will be about it, right? Now, the challenge with that is what happens is we call analysis paralysis, which means that you'll get stuck in data, right? You'll get stuck in all this information coming through. And so you got to be careful of being stuck in analysis paralysis. Only the education and the coaching will help you get you through it. And then the second thing that overcomes fear is by doing it. Whatever you're afraid of, you do it, right? So there's a book out there, it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the second thing that you need to do is get as much information as you can to a certain extent, to a certain point, and then make the decision to go ahead and do it anyway, or completely the opposite direction, not do it, only now you're moving forward to something else versus being stuck deciding what to do or not what to do, right? You got to make a decision whether to do it or not to do it and move forward.
And I think one of the areas that people have a problem with is, well, I'm not going to do it perfectly, right? And of course, first of all, you'll never do it perfectly, but secondly, you'll do it less perfectly today and hopefully more perfectly tomorrow, if I can use the non-perfect to perfect spectrum in this example. And it's just a matter of practice. And I think sometimes we get scared because there's this guy running around saying that in order to be like the world's best at something, you need 10,000 hours of practice and study. And that was kind of like, well, that's, when is that ever going to happen in my life, right? Of course, the thing is 10,000 hours go by whether you're practicing what you want to get good at or you're watching Netflix. So you've got that decision to make. But what was kind of a beacon of hope was another fellow said, yeah, it's going to take you 10,000 hours to be really good. And if you have talent, you can be Fred Astaire in dancing. Most of us don't have that level of talent, but we can be, pretty good at something. But he said, in order to get competent at something, takes about 20 hours of focused training. So obviously not 1 hour a year for 20 years. That doesn't work. But he said this learning curve is actually very steep, and then it's very small incrementals until you get to the 10,000 hours. Because like when you know how to count to, well, let's say if you know how to use an Excel spreadsheet, right? And you're using it every day, then you're going to be fairly good at using it. But there are always going to be things that those programmers stick in Excel that we don't know about until we do something and we go, oh, there it is. So, but that doesn't mean that until I knew that one little obscure function that I was no good on Excel. I was very competent in Excel. So I think that's kind of the good news too, is if you want to know something or get good at something, then dedicate, and I would say 40 hours, because I've spent over 20 hours learning Spanish, and I don't think I'm very good at my Spanish yet, although I am way better than I was before I took my Spanish lessons. But
so you touched on several topics there, Scott. Where do I begin?
Oops.
So let's start with what you started with, which was being perfect, right? And in
thank you.
Yes. And in business, if you focus on being perfect in everything, then you will not move forward fast. I don't know, like I said, of anything that you've ever done your first time where you're perfect at it. And so, get over being the perfect thing. You're gonna, like in life, we learn by doing, right? We learn by actually experiencing things. And in doing so, we obviously make mistakes because we're human. And unless you're a robot that's been programmed to do everything exactly as assigned, then it's very difficult to be perfect in everything in life. And so if we can get over the concept of being perfect and just, as you said, Scott, being competent, right? And if you're competent enough and you make the right decisions, then you're going to make decisions that will reap you greater rewards than when you make mistakes, right? Because you're going to minimize your mistakes as much as possible. And so that's the first thing in business, is that you got to make decisions. And the most successful people I know, successful CEOs, they make decisions quickly, right? They make fast decisions, and then they deal with the consequences, whether those consequences are good or they're bad. It's they make that decision so that they can move on to that next step. And the ones that aren't so successful take forever to make decisions. And by the time they do make decisions, whatever the opportunity has already passed them by, right? So get over being the perfect thing. And then you talked, I don't remember what else you talked about, Scott, only you talked about a lot of things.
Proving that you two are not perfect. That's great.
There you go.
Well, so let's move on from well, was fear? It was what was holding back people when it came to their fear, and so let's talk about something else, when a different type of fear, and that I think there's a fear that no one will ever admit, and of course it totally ties in with comfort zones, and that's the fear of success. Like, what happens if I'm actually successful and I have a company that makes $1 million profit a year? And right now I'm like, if I want to light a fire, to have a campfire, I have to get 2 sticks because I can't afford matches.
Well, first realize that that's a good challenge to have, is a business that's making a lot of money for you, right?
Right. But I don't have it yet, right? I mean, but I believe that if I did actually do this business, then it would be a huge success. So yeah. I do things to sabotage it.
Yes. And so again, the keys there is understand that business, like anything in life, is a journey, right? It's not a race. It's not an instantaneous. And that's part of the challenge we have with our society, is that we're so accustomed to instant gratification, right? And so you got to understand that business, like anything, is a journey. It's a process. And if you do have great success and you generate a large amount of income, well, that allows you to, and what it does is that it opens up more doors for more opportunities for you. And so then it's just a matter of choosing what those opportunities are. And what I will also say is that it also allows you then to explore more relationships and get more help and support, right? And so that's the key thing, is right now, if you're an individual person thinking about starting a business and you're afraid of growing too quickly or getting too much success, just understand with that success comes an opportunity for you to get more support and get more help, get more education, get more coaching, get more people to surround yourself with to help you grow even faster. I mean, can you imagine if you're in college, right, and you start a business, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, it's $1 billion business, right? And then that $1 billion business is now $100 billion business. Like, how do you manage all that by yourself? And the answer is you don't. It's impossible for you to do that by yourself. Right. And so you do have to, again, start looking for that team that you want to surround yourself with, the individuals who you want to use as leverage for support and for growth. And that's what you really need to understand, is that don't be afraid of success. Just realize that whatever you're doing, chances are somebody has already done it before you, and you could leverage their experience and their knowledge to help you grow even faster.
So one way to get over fear is to not be alone. Like I just, as I was speaking, I had this image in my head, because we've just finished, well, it's been a month ago since Halloween, but of one of these big old scary mansions, with the bats flying around, a full moon, everything's dark, and you're wandering in the house by yourself, creaking floorboards, wondering when the vampire or ghosts are going to come out of the woodwork and scare you. And it occurred to me that if you had someone beside you with a flashlight who'd been there many times and knew their way around, then it wouldn't be anywhere near as scary as being alone.
It's funny you bring that up, because one of my buddies, who is a mortgage broker, by the way, it's his primary business, does ghost hunting as one of his hobbies, and he runs a ghost hunting business. And when I was networking with him at one of my luncheons that I hold, one of the guys asked, "Have you ever been really scared? Does it really get scary and spooky with you?" And his answer was, "Well, I'm usually not by myself, so I'm usually not that scared." He's like, "If I was by myself, I'd probably be scared, except usually there's like a whole team of people with me as we're going through looking at things, so it's not that scary." And brings to your point, Scott, if he had to go hunt that haunted mansion by himself, he'd probably get scared. Right?
I would be scared even if nothing ever happened. Just don't get separated in the haunted mansion. Because
that's right.
Every scary movie has a group of kids going in there, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, doors slam and they're all by themselves, and that's where they're scared. That's where the fear is, isn't it? It's like, we're alone.
Yes, and you're right. So being alone in your business, being alone in the things that you do is scary, and that is a source of fear. And so again, as you said, Scott, to overcome that, find the right people to work with. And I do have, I will throw caution in the wind, right? Which is the best businesses I've ever had in my entire life have been with partners. And the worst businesses I've ever had in my entire life have been with partners. So that shouldn't be something to prevent you from moving forward. Like, because I know that the best businesses I've ever had have been with partners, I will continually look for partners for other business opportunities and business ventures. Now, I will also realize that the worst businesses I've ever had is with partners. And so, keeping that in mind, then that helps me minimize my risk by finding the right partners and working with the right people. And every now and then, even though I might think that that's the perfect person for that position or for that business or whatever, life happens and people change. And, in one of my businesses that I started out with somebody who was phenomenal and great. And unfortunately, in her lifetime, in her experience, she experienced some personal tragedies. And as much as I wanted to help her, she had to go through that herself. And because she went through that personal tragedy, it changed her, and it made her a little bit difficult to work with in a business environment. We had to separate, and I still wish her the best. I love her dearly. At the same time, from a business standpoint, we just couldn't work together anymore. And that just happened because, again, life happened, right? So, and like I said, the best businesses I've ever had have been with partners, with people that I can trust, people that could watch my back and cover me if I had to do something else, or I had to do, go down a different path for some reason, that I could throw ideas against back and forth that we can expand. And that leads us to the concept of the mastermind, which we can discuss at a later episode. Right. And you definitely want to find the right people to work with, kind of like what we're doing now, Scott, with this podcast, right? We're working co-hosting, working together. And that allows us to riff off each other, as you say, and throw ideas back and forth.
And it also forces us to be accountable, right?
Yes.
Because we said, even though I got the time wrong, we still ended up starting pretty much on time, or on near the time you wanted to start.
Hey, just everyone got a bonus hour of Scott.
That's right. That's right. But because we're accountable, like, to be quite honest, when you texted me saying, "Hey, I'm ready to go," and I thought that you were an hour late and realized you weren't, I was on my way I'm in Playa del Carmen, and I was on the way to walk on the beach. So I know that if we hadn't made that commitment and I was going to do it myself, I had looked out and said, it's a nice day today, I'm going to go walk on the beach, instead of doing what we're doing right now. So I find that having partners really keeps me accountable, keeps me on track, keeps me moving forward. And because I wouldn't. And I remember one of my mentors was talking once and saying, 20,000 years ago, you had saber-toothed tigers roaming the fields, and we would be out hunting deer or antelope or whatever it was. When we got it, we would, cut it all up, put it over a fire, we'd eat it, we'd be stuffed, and we'd be laying around doing nothing for a few hours. And as long as there was enough food there, then great. I mean, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no YouTube. So what were they going to do? They would just lay around and do nothing. And he said, that's kind of the way that, on a cellular level we're made, is we work really hard when we don't know if we're going to be able to pay the rent. We don't know we're going to be able to buy food. But once those survival levels are kind of done, then it takes an awful lot of energy and brain power to go do all the things that we're doing. And he was saying that in a way to acknowledge and congratulate human beings for doing all these things that they do once they're full. There's a roof over my head, I had a good night's sleep, I'm full of food, and there's no saber-toothed tiger is going to eat me. So the natural thing is to sit on a hammock somewhere, and the unnatural thing is to go build a business or build a doghouse or whatever it is that we're creating, painting, or all those things. So I think we need to acknowledge that as we take these steps, we're actually going beyond the way that we're built.
Well, and so that just brings up another thought or concept, Scott, which is the sense of urgency, right? And having a sense of urgency is critical for business success. And the reason that brought up came into my mind is that you can create a sense of urgency in whatever you're doing to overcome your fear of not doing it, right? And so that's critical. Is instead of thinking, what will happen if I do this, and be afraid of everything that will happen, the question then comes to mind of what will happen if I don't do this? And if you don't do this, what are you going to miss out on? And if you read the biographies of Bill Gates and even Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, these multi-billionaires, they'll always say that they felt that if they didn't do what they were doing, that they were going to miss the boat, that they were going to miss the opportunity. And Bill Gates back in '85, when he started Microsoft, was like, I had to do this. I had to drop out of college and build this, because if I didn't do it, then I would have missed the boat and everybody else would have done it ahead of me. Even though he was years ahead of everybody else, he had that sense of urgency, which forced him to work hard and build Microsoft. And so again, when having that sense of urgency for you and your business is critical for you to not only just overcome fear, right? It's just to actually grow and build success at a faster rate. So
great point. So Chaffee, we're getting close to the end of our time together today. But before we go, there's one other aspect of fear that when I read this part of our notes, I wasn't thinking of it as fear. So it's kind of an interesting one for me. And that is paralysis by analysis. And so that's a fear-based behavior.
Right. And so I touched that a little bit of that earlier, which is, remember, overcoming fear by educating yourself and getting more information. The challenge is, and especially if you use the DISC model of personality, of behavior, and you identify yourself as an analytical person. And when I say analytical people, I mean the engineers, the doctors, the accountants, the attorneys, people that are so enmeshed in looking at the data and analyzing the data, is that you can get stuck. And obviously, Scott, since you and I are familiar with this, and I think a lot of people that might be listening to this podcast might be familiar, is the looking at a real estate deal, right? Analyzing whether or not to buy a property, and you're looking at, what is the after repaired value? What are the repairs that need to go into it? How much does it cost to fix a a kitchen? Do I just need to fix the cabinets, or do I need to fix the floors and the backsplash, and what about the appliances? And then you start looking at all these numbers, right? And you start looking at all this stuff, and instead of making an offer on the property, you analyze this property. It takes you a full week to analyze it, only to come to the realization of, hey, this is a great deal, I should make an offer. And then you make that offer to find out that it's no longer for sale because somebody made an offer 4 days ago. Right? And so that's what happens with analysis paralysis, is that you spend so much time looking at something, you're not taking the proper actions and moving forward with that, and realizing that you can still do that analysis along the way, right? You can still make those kind of decisions as you're moving forward with the process. The key is moving forward with the process. The key is making decisions and allowing yourself to move forward versus having to wait until you've, as we said, have the perfect scenario to make a deal, and then missing out on the deal. So you don't have to have all of the information ahead of time. Give yourself a deadline, a date, to get as much information as you can up to that deadline, that hour point, or that date. And then once you reach that decision point or that timeline, then make a decision. As I said earlier, make a decision and then deal with the consequences, right? Figure out what the potential consequences are, and then make the decision and move forward. And so that's how you got to succeed.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important for people to understand is that when you can make a poor decision and make it work.
Yes.
But you cannot take a non-decision and make it work.
Yes.
And so even if you've got kind of two choices, you're not 100% sure which is the best, and you pick one of them, then you can make that a successful decision, even if it's maybe shouldn't have been or won't be as successful as the other one.
And the key is, just like anything, is that you're constantly learning along the way, right? So whether it's a good decision or a poor decision, what are the lessons learned from that, so that the next time something similar happens or comes up, can you make the similar, a faster decision, a better decision, some kind of decision that will move you forward faster, or a decision to walk away and move on to the next deal, right? So, always learn from your decisions.
Yeah. Which reminds me of the story of this guy who was always making great decisions, and someone asked him, how do you learn to make so many great decisions? Lots of bad ones.
Yep. It happens.
Yeah. And that's the advantage of a coach and mentor, right? Is usually that those people have already made all those mistakes, or they know about all those mistakes, and they can help you avoid all those mistakes.
Yeah, we always say that you're going to pay for education one way or another. And you can go through what we call the school of hard knocks, which is go buy it yourself or go do it yourself and figure it out yourself. And your mistakes could be more costly than not. Or you can pay for a coach or a mentor or somebody that's done it, that's been there, and have them guide you through the process and reduce or eliminate a lot of the mistakes that you might make. So it's up to you. And one way is easier than the other. Trust me, I know. I've done both.
Right. Awesome. Well, that takes us to the end of today's show. Chaffee, any last words of wisdom?
Last words of wisdom is that if you are feeling fear or anything that's preventing you from moving forward, ask us questions. Type it in the chat or type it in the comments area so that we can help you get through that. So ask questions anytime that you're feeling stuck. The best way to get out of feeling stuck is to ask a lot of people a lot of questions to get the information to move forward and then make that decision. So ask us questions and we can answer those in an upcoming episode for you.
Great. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been Business Success. I'm your host, Scott Patton, along with Chaffee. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you later.